And I'll turn it over to Dr. Edwards to talk a little bit about some of the areas of focus, some big areas for us this year around teaching and learning.
Most definitely, some big areas. Obviously, as we've talked about in the adoption of the updated strategic plan, academic excellence is at the core of our work. And one of the things that continues to be something that we bring to our teachers each and every day is a focus on how can we do our curriculum review, adoption, and implementation process in a way that is creating that opportunity for a viable and guaranteed curriculum for all of our students that aligns with our national, state, and local standards. We definitely know that that continues to be a challenge for us in that as standards change, we need to adapt our practices in alignment with that. And we definitely are making those adjustments. You as a board have heard over the course of the last couple of years some fairly significant adjustments that we've made. Most often around instructional practices first, and then finding curriculum that aligns to allow us to make those shifts in instructional practices, all so that we can bring about those higher levels of student achievement. And we have obviously implemented new math curriculum at the elementary level, implementing new math curriculum at this middle school level, and beginning that work at this high school level as well. And we're on the verge, and just a bit of a teaser, we're going to bring back to you as a board at the upcoming September 9th meeting some additional background and detail around the upcoming READ Act implementation. And I'll bring a team of folks that are have been a part of planning that and getting that ready for launch as we bring that phase 1 to our elementaries teachers and our special ed teachers across our system K-12. With that in mind, obviously when we ask our teachers to change their practice, we need to engage in high levels of professional development to do so. Obviously our staff are our greatest resource with regard to that, and we definitely need to make sure that that work is aligned. That's a word that I've used numerous times as we are moving out our new strategic plan with our learning leaders throughout the summer months, and had a chance to kick off this afternoon, as a matter of fact, with our 612 teachers, talking about that alignment to not only the time that we have, but all components. So for example, we were talking today, this afternoon, as a matter of fact, shared with you as a board back in our June meeting about the new frameworks for evaluation, teacher evaluation frameworks. And today we spent time sharing with our secondary staff, because we have begun that work with our elementary staff last year to align the curriculum work and instructional work that we were doing. So we're doing that to maximize the limited opportunities. Time is a precious commodity, as we know. We never have enough time. So how do we make that work aligned through our existing time, including the learning team structure that QCOM brings to us, as well as our early release days that are so invaluable to our staff to allow them to continue to grow. Along those lines, our school continuous improvement plans, we worked a lot this past summer in collaboration among our LAI team, most specifically Dr. Zumbush and I, in bringing a school continuous improvement plan to our respective sites that was aligned to our new strategic plan, and visually made that very clear that academic excellence was our top priority at our site levels. So the document that they are preparing, that we will work to have both a working document as well as a front-facing document, forward-facing document, has very clearly at the top academic excellence, and are setting goals around that. I was reminded of actually a couple of buildings that were engaged in that conversation recently as they were shaping that plan for the upcoming year, when Dr. Thomas was talking about the D's and F's and the conversation we were having earlier with the contract for PSEO. That's a focus that our schools have been doing, our secondary schools in particular, recognizing that that's something that they need to pay particular close attention to. And each site, in collaboration with their building instructional leadership team, another acronym built that we have, they developed that SCIP plan, and again, we want to make sure that it's aligned to our new strategic plan. And then finally, point of emphasis I wanted to make was that we continue to maintain a strong commitment to engaging with our community around teaching and learning in our advisory committee. We increased our participation in that this past year and had a really strong interest. I alluded to that at our August meeting when presenting our roster for the upcoming school year. And we're going to continue to bring that forward, strong community engagement in the work, as well as expanding to include, Sam's earlier point, APAC specifically is a gap that we're going to make sure to have a part of that work as we move forward. So excited. It was great to have teachers. I got a chance to visit with a number of elementary buildings, not all of them this morning, but there's a great energy around this renewed focus that I would say around the strategic plan, and look forward to a great year.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards.
Thank you.
So you all mentioned this earlier, just around your retreat, and that this whole notion of focusing on continually improving and using data to kind of drive that process. And so Dr. Zumbush will be coming forward also to really talk about how we've centered our work around a continuous improvement practice model, knowing that none of us are perfect and none of our students are perfect, and our processes and how we assess for learning, these are things that we're always wanting to make sure are driving a lot of our key decisions in the district. So with that, I'll let Dr. Zumbush talk a little bit about some of her efforts in that space.
Thank you. Good evening to the board. Yeah, in kind of what Dr. Edwards was already saying, with the continuous improvement plan and the department improvement plan, just trying to get everything aligned to the strategic plan, and then also work with departments and schools to come up with key metrics to determine, in particular, those leading indicators that can help us determine whether schools or departments are making progress towards their goals, so that we can make those mid-course corrections. We've been having some really good conversations about some different data points that we can be using on those different plans. A lot of the work I've been doing over the last 2 years have been a lot of data quality cleanup so that the data can be more transparent. It has to be in a certain state in order for it to provide useful information. So a lot of that has just been tightening up processes. I just spent 2 hours today with deans, again, tightening up behavior data codes and all of those things so that we can really clean up our data systems and have that data be transparent in a way that's useful and giving us good information to be able to act on. So that data quality and transparency is really in alignment with the strategic plan. I'm going to continue to work on that with the FastBridge reporting and the behavior reporting that I did at the end of last year, and then working on attendance reporting as well. And then in terms of community engagement, really trying to bridge the family connection on kind of that positive and areas for improvement in terms of the feedback for families by providing that FastBridge information to families. The barrier for that in the past has been the comfort level of teachers being able to speak about that comfortably to parents. So tomorrow we're doing a complete refresh of FastBridge training for all K-5 staff so that they're reorienting. It came during the pandemic, so it's just kind of a refresh, restart on the FastBridge screener to make sure everyone's doing it in the same way and knows how to implement it with fidelity, and also the why behind it so that we have a better and deeper understanding of why we're doing that and what it's telling us. So that is going to be happening, not tomorrow, sorry, Wednesday. And then kindergarten, first grade teachers are actually going to be doing it themselves this year because the assessment monitors were hired with COVID dollars. So they're going to be really digging in a lot deeper into what that data is telling them and why they're giving that assessment. And the last thing I wanted to just point out is my focus this year is really us bridging the gap between assessment and instruction. I think currently there's some disconnect between assessment and instruction, and really trying to bridge that gap so that we're using assessment information to drive instruction and drive decision-making versus it being seen more as a separate thing. So a lot of the other thing I'm implementing is benchmark data from MCAs. It's really like breaking apart what is going well within each of our MCA strands and how it aligns to standards. So that is all getting rolled out this week as well. So that the MCA data is much more actionable. Previously it's kind of that rear view mirror look, but this will be able, we'll be able to have conversations about how to actually make it actionable from an instructional perspective.
If I may add something that we, Dr. Zumbush and I are quite excited about, talking about making data actionable with the skip plans at the high school level, some focus on the ACT and the different components, data that gives to us to indicate student progress and where there are gaps. And that's something that we're gonna we are spending a significant amount of time with the high school team. They are leading that charge to really make that come to life as a indicator of progress and where we need to continue to grow.
Yeah, similar to MCA's, ACTs has benchmark data, and we're really unpacking that and helping specific departments at the high school understand where things are falling through the cracks in terms of, missed concepts and, at what mapping at what grade students get that information when they might need to return to it in order to stay on track for those college benchmarks for ACT. So kind of a parallel project at the high school with ACTs as I'm doing with the MCAs at K-8.
I have a question. For the MCA data, is it instantaneous that we as a district receive the results? Is that correct? That teachers can access it almost instantaneously? Or is that what you're referring to when you're saying that you're going to be using that data?
Well, the preliminary results are instantaneous, but they're embargoed, so we can't share them. They come out this Thursday. Okay. The data I'm talking about that I'm doing all the mapping of is specifically, and I'm using it with the previous year's data to get the whole system set up, but really understanding, because each MCA, there's each MCA like section of questions is aligned to a grade level standard. And so really pulling apart where the specific things that our district, like that we see as a system, are areas of strength and areas of challenge. We don't have the benchmarks reports until the data becomes unembargoed, but just trying to roll out that whole system so that when we do get the data on Thursday, it'll be ready to go.
Right, so really understanding where are we falling short
Right.
within those
and looking
different
at historic
categories.
trends.
You're right.
Yeah,
So that it's
regard
ready
to
to
standards.
In
Okay.
a very granular way, and yes to standards. And so the board, you all are gonna hear a lot of conversation around alignment of assessment to instruction as a state. This is a big conversation because there are some structural components that many are kind of sounding some alarms about that just are not making much sense across the entire state. Misalignment between how we're assessing kids, how the standards are reading, the depth of knowledge, our ability to understand on a very granular level. What does this MCA score mean when you unpack that into the substrands within that to say it's this specific skill set? And that skill set ties directly to this standard by MDE. There's just been a lot of holes with assessment. I think we're also gonna be seeing some continued conversations around the utility and do we continue certain assessments or certain grade levels to take certain assessments, because we're seeing massive trends and patterns emerge throughout the state of certain time frames or grade levels. Assessments don't really make sense by the time we actually can take action on the data that we receive. So more to come on that, because this is a bigger conversation than just our district. Many superintendents, this is likely going to be something that will land in a legislative agenda from AMSD. It's that big of a conversation, so stay tuned for that, but we just kind of had our first kind of egg crack on that last Friday morning with AMSD, so.
Does that also apply to Fastbridge? Or like, does our Fastbridge better align to standards? I mean, I'm not trying to get
Our
in the weeds,
Fastbridge, yeah.
but I'm just like trying to understand the correlation between.
It's different because Fastbridge is a screener.
Fastbridge measures prerequisite skills that students need in order to access grade level content.
Oh, okay.
So it's really identifying if there's a gap that needs to be filled in order for them to obtain the knowledge needed in the standard. It doesn't measure standards.
Okay, that makes sense,
We'll-
thank you.
We'll be bringing a much more robust conversation on this topic and this intersectionality at the study session in September. That's our plan anyways. Okay? Thank you, Dr. Zumbush.
Thank you.
All right, I believe Director Chuka is next on deck to talk a little bit about student support services.
Okay, so I was kind of reflecting on the core beliefs of accountability, respect, unity, and stewardship when I put together what I would talk about today. Accountability is kind of built into at least special education, right? Every student has an individualized education plan that is gone over annually with parents, and goals are monitored multiple times a year. One thing that I'm going to work on with the staff in my department towards that academic excellence and this accountability piece is a real push on data that's quantifiable and really aligned to everything that's going on, so parents truly can understand it a little bit better. And I feel like I'm sort of mimicking and echoing what's been said, but that assessment and progress monitoring, like what are we assessing and what are we monitoring? And is the data that we're monitoring really getting to the goal that we want? So we're working on that. I'm excited. We're actually doing some of that first trainings tomorrow afternoon on working through some of that. We've also done a lot of work around paraprofessional professional development over the last 2 years. And that's in a push to really help support them, to help support our students. Another way we show accountability and respect is through our quarterly special education parent advisory council meetings, where parents have the opportunity to provide us feedback on district development of programs that serve families and students using our special education services. Partnering with families is always an important component to moving forward with our work. Obviously, we're pretty big on unity and respect in special ed. We have a team of amazing educators both in and out of special education right now over the last 18 months or so, really growing our unified programming through the Special Olympics. The goal is to develop authentic relationships between our students with disabilities with our students without disabilities. We are 2 electives taking off this year at the high school. One is a unified bio class and the other is a unified facts class or cooking class. So we're really excited to get those going. Our goal this year, lofty or not, is to make all of our schools unified schools. And we are meeting with, I think it's the building level leadership teams on Thursday of all of the schools interested to really try to get it going. Right now, it's the middle schools and the high schools have it going pretty well. Now we're just trying to move that down into the elementary level. Another way we strive for unity and respect is through our Special Education Advisory Council's annual Inclusivity Awards. So every year, our Special Ed Advisory Council asks parents and students and staff to nominate people. It could be other parents, it could be other students, staff members of any level, that kind of exemplify unity. It doesn't necessarily even have to do with special ed, but what are we doing to really make sure our environments are really, really inclusive? And so those are always a big hit. Everyone is always touched when they're able to do that. I mean, we honor custodians, bus drivers, teachers, other students. We have parent groups. That's always a fun part of the year. And then I think it's also important to be accountable to staff and be respectful of our staff. And so I provide a monthly update to our team. And we've also worked really hard the last couple of years on a workload analysis to ensure equitable staffing, not just based on numbers, but also just based on workload. And I've worked pretty closely with Director Herman and Director Frederickson on kind of a predictable base staffing model so we can be really responsible financially, so we know what it is and we can really justify when we are asking for more staff. Like, you know, we have this base model and these are why we're asking for more, so we can show that good stewardship there. And then work with a workflow committee with staff too, that we meet twice a year, just to make sure that people are feeling things are equitable across the buildings and then the load that they have, because 13 kids here and 13 kids here could be a really different workload within special education. So with that, we'll continue to work towards that data and academic excellence in student support services as well as across the district, while we still are optimizing our resources and being positive, so. All right. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle. And Mr. Powers, I think, will be coming up next, and as he's coming forward, you know, obviously newer in the role, and he doesn't know I was going to say this, and I didn't either until I just kind of felt it. But when we were interviewing for this role, you know, obviously a really critical role to fill, one of the things that stood out to me about Daniel is he made a statement, I'm paraphrasing, every person that walks into one of our buildings is my customer. And I'm going to tell you, in the short time that he's been with us, I have seen that in every interaction I've had with him. To know that you uphold customer satisfaction, customer service at that level is something that, you know, I just want to thank you for in that short time, because that's what people are continuing to tell me. So kids aren't going to learn in a dirty, unsafe building. And that's something that you also spoke about in your interview, and how that's super important. You see a direct correlation between your work and the outcomes of our kids. So turn this to you and speak on behalf of your team.
Following up on that, I have a conceit, and I admit it full out. This doesn't happen without the operational side of things, because the buildings have to be maintained, they have to be cleaned. How I work with my team is exactly what Dr. Thomas was talking about. Everyone that comes into my building, I don't care who they are my customer. It could be the students, it could be the teaching staff, it might be the community at large, because everyone in our community will use one of our facilities. And it's not just when they're coming into those buildings, it's when they're walking outside and seeing the condition that the outside of the building is in. It matters. Those opinions, those people that are calling us up and sending those emails when they have a question about why something looks the way it does, it matters to me. And I need to make sure and find out, first off, why it looks that way, how I can correct it, and how I can make it more appealing to everyone else in the community. Because everyone in the community sees our buildings. We are the people, we're the first thing they see when they walk in, we're the last thing they see when they leave. My goal is to make sure that every one of our facilities gets that attention, whether it's Five Hawks or the high school. I'm there to make sure that I get the attention to all of those locations. And how I do that is I work with every one of my staff, I work with my vendors to make sure that we're doing things as efficiently as we can. That might mean using the correct chemicals. That might be teaching my staff how to do things differently. Making sure that I'm giving them the type of attention that they deserve to get their job done. I talk a lot about my style of leadership. My style of leadership is to give my team the tools they need and get out of their way. Let them do their job. And when they have those questions, to reach out to me, and when I can help, I will help them. Whether it's teaching them how to strip a floor better, or whether it's grabbing a corner of something they're trying to move. My job is to be there to help them get their job done so that we can be there for the community. I talk a lot about making sure that we're planning for the future for our buildings. There's more than just the needs right now. I could tell you a dozen things that we're dealing with in every building in the district. But how we plan for the maintenance of those buildings, make sure that we can maintain and be the proper stewards of those locations is a very important part of everything that I do when I'm reaching out and looking at these things. So I do consider operations, we're the people behind the scenes, but we aren't. And I hope that everyone around here and the community, that they will reach out to me if they see something and question something, so that we can make sure and make it better for them as well. The last time I spoke with the high school group, and this is it's a weird thing that I do a lot of the times, and the people here may know this answer, they may not. How many times have we landed on the moon? How many people have walked on the moon? Most people don't know. I mean, I was alive for all of those, so I remember vividly every time we did it. We landed on the moon 6 times. 12 people walked on the moon. Where did those people learn to do what they're doing? I get emotional, sorry. That's my gig. It's the teachers that taught those kids how to get there. Those teachers were able to do that because we did our job. So we don't know if we've got the next Neil Armstrong in our schools, or the next Einstein, or the next prima ballerina. My job is to make sure and give them the facility so that they can reach their goals. And that's the way I looked at my job. That's the straightforward thing. And as I look at our plan, it doesn't change it. My job is to make sure I do the things the best I can every day. And I'm hoping that, like I said before, that people will reach out to me and help me to make my job better. So, thank you for all of that.
I appreciate your heart behind the work. I mean, it truly is the heart that matters, and it is evident that your heart is in the work that you do to serve our students and our community, and I appreciate you sharing that with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Joel's going to bring us home. You heard a little bit about the phenomenal work that he and his team are doing in community education, but we clearly have traditional daytime instructional support that happens with our students, but as Daniel said too, a lot of our families access our schools outside of our traditional K-12 instructional time. And this is the heart and soul of that, and how that's grown immensely since your tenure in our district. So I yield to you.
I was gonna say save the best for last, but clearly I can't beat.
You're gonna make us cry too?
No, I'm gonna try not to, but in a short amount of time, I've really appreciated working with Dan as well, and 100% support what he just shared. He cares very much about our facilities and making sure that we're providing appropriate space. In the community education department, my team and I have been meeting and discussing the new strategic plan and really how we can align towards that through everything from our early childhood programs to our adult programming, our facility use reservations. And really we came up with 5 different areas that we're going to focus on, and clearly we haven't had a ton of time to dig into all of those yet. And a lot of these words or phrases are words and phrases you've heard numerous times tonight. And so I'm going to keep this short and brief, but our focus areas, one is around citizen involvement. That's one of the key aspects of community education, is involving your community members in your schools, whether that's through the facility use, whether it's volunteering in programs, and also a big push on getting new members to join our advisory council, both our early childhood council as well as our community education council. That is a way for community members to become involved. Whether they have kids in the schools or not, they can still help us determine what are the needs in our community and how, as a school district and community ed program, can we support those needs. The second part is on collaboration and partnership. We have city programs here that offer a lot of parks and recreational programming. In some districts, community eds provide that, as the cities don't have it. But what are some ways that we can continue to partner with them and improve and increase the programming and opportunities that our students have in our community? Also looking to collaborate with our county, with community service-based organizations, our local libraries, anybody who's willing to work with us and provide additional opportunities of resources, and again, meeting the needs of our community members. So collaboration and partnership, engagement and accessibility. So we've talked a ton about this in our community ed programs. How do we continue to engage our community members, specifically those who, again, may not have children in our schools? What can we provide them? What can we offer them not just around supporting our schools, but really enriching their lives as well. And that really goes back to our adult enrichment classes and opportunities that we provide. And the engagement accessibility is also around our facility use, getting people in the buildings, whether it's PLAY programs, whether it's a play or a musical going on, getting people into our facilities and having them become engaged and see what we offer here in Prior Lake is really important to community education. Accountability is another one, and all of us have talked about the accountability piece. One of the things that, or a couple things that we do is we provide an annual report every year on our participation numbers. We also report back on our financials throughout the year. And that goes from early childhood, submitting annual reports every year, to our community ed program, on our enrollment numbers in our classes, on the amount of use of our facilities. All of that goes back to our state reporting to hold us accountable. And it also includes our kids company programming. So a lot of what we do and through those reports gets tied back to some of the funding that we receive. And again, community ed doesn't receive a lot of funding. Most of our program is fee-based, about 92% is fee-based. But we do receive some support, and so we want to be accountable to that, just like all other departments and programming areas in our schools. And then the last piece is alignment. We've heard others talk about alignment as well. That really talks specifically about our early ed programs. And one of the big things is making sure that our pre-K program is aligned to our elementaries, so that by the time those 4 and 5-year-olds become kindergartners, we've prepared them for kindergarten. We've made sure that they're ready to move on to that next level. And you hear sometimes people talking about pre-K becoming the new kindergarten, but really our focus is on the same thing it has been for years and years and years. And that's around the social and emotional development, so that they are ready to learn. And is there an academic component? Absolutely. There's some academics involved in preschool, but it's really about teaching them how to learn, preparing them for that. So aligning our pre-K program to our K, both in the academic areas as well as assessments. And we've worked a lot with Jenny this year on the assessment piece, and we use different tools and what they utilize in our K-12 system. But the tools that we're using align well to the tools that the district is using. So you can easily transfer data from what we're receiving on our pre-K students and transfer that into the kindergarten and elementary age students as well. So again, citizen involvement, collaboration and partnerships, engagement and accessibility, the accountability piece, and alignment are the 5 main areas that my team will be focusing on this next year. Any questions for me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say that the community back-to-school event was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Huge credit to the communications team as well. So we partnered on that. It was a great event.
And that the rain stopped.
That was me in my car about 5 minutes before when they were dropping off the bounce houses. Going, please. All I asked.
I called Ken Barlow and he did us a solid. So I hope you all, becoming a world-class district centered on students, driven by results, does not happen by chance. It's great intentionality of the leadership team that you've heard from today. And really proud to work alongside these folks every single day, and really excited for the year that we're kicking out tomorrow. So thank you for taking a little time at the study session so you got a little chance to understand how we are breathing life into the strategic plan and becoming that. So thank you. Chair France, I turn it back to you for the next agenda.
Thank you very much. Next is on the agenda is the audit update by Director Frederickson.
If you could just indulge me for just a moment before I start the audit update, I wanted to give you all an update on our investments, because I did talk to PMA at the end of last week. And as you know, when we reinvest, it happens very quickly, and so I don't have a lot of time to bring it to the board. So I just wanted to give you an update. We do have 2 fixed rate investments that matured this week. And then by the end of the year, there'll be another $2 million that have matured. The feds have indicated that they're gonna be dropping interest rates 3 times by the end of the year. We're anticipating by the end of next month, the rate will be about 5%. By November, it'll be down to 4.7, December 4.3, and by next May, we anticipated about 3.7%. So what I had a conversation with the folks at PMA, and we are going to take $3 million and invest in 2 CDs, one a 17-month that we're going to get about 4.12%, and then another 1.5 million for a 23-month that we're going to get about 3.95% net rate, which actually will, if the interest rates do end up at 3% by next year, then we've locked in at higher than that. So I indicated for them to go ahead, so just wanted to let you all know that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent update. Now under the audit, the good stuff.
Audit. Let's move along.
Yeah.
The audit update, I don't have something official to give you yet because we are still working on the audit. We have 3 more audit entries that we're working on. We still have to book the TRA, PRA, which is teacher retirement, and the public employees retirement. Those are always one of the last things that we enter. We also have to get our final state aid and the tax receivable, so those have to get booked yet. I can tell you that we are looking at, our original budget for revenue was 115.1 million. We're going to end up about 119.3 million. Expenses, we budgeted 116.5 million. We're going to end up around, and again, these are not final numbers, but we're going to end up about 123 million. We're doing some deep analytical work to see where the differences are. And for revenue, I can tell you that when we have given the numbers to the board, I think you all recall that sheet that I give you that has all of the different state aids, and then the levies, and then we have other revenue. So as we look at the state aids, we're not off that far. We had budgeted 93.3 million, and we're coming in about 94.7 million. So that's about a 1.6% difference. The levy, we budgeted 18.2 million, and we're coming in about 18.7, which is just under 3%. But where we did get a significant amount of additional revenue is in the other categories. We budgeted 3.6 million, and we're coming in about 5.8. So an example of that is interest income. When I budget for interest income, I take a 3-year average. I look at the past 3 years, see what we had over the past 3 years, and come up with an average. So we budgeted about just under $500,000, and we actually got 1.2 million this year, which is a good thing, but it's, again, it's not something that I can necessarily predict. I just have to go by the averages over the 3 years. We also, for athletics, we budgeted 790 million. We came in a little over $1 million. E-rates, we budgeted 10,000 and came in at 82,000. I did not budget anything for donations or insurance recovery, and we're actually getting almost 500,000 for that. Insurance recovery, the biggest one is the high school scoreboard. As you all know, got hit by lightning. We didn't know whether we were going to be able to recover any insurance on that. Turns out we did, but then we also had to buy a new scoreboard, so it kind of worked out. So the biggest variance in that revenue is coming from other revenue sources. As we looked at the expenses, it's a difference of about $6.5 million. Little over 2 million of it is from special ed. We just spent more money, and part of that was, as you recall, when we were doing the budget for this year, we moved some salary positions out of federal dollars and put them into the state aid so that we could put the tuition in federal, which then in 2 years will give us some state aid on the special ed. Special ed is always at least a year or two behind of the revenue. So we ended up having more expenses last year in order to get more revenue next year. We also have spent about $2.3 million on extra time, which includes like Miss Prep, extended time, stipends, any of that. We did not budget $2.3 million, so that we overspent that. Our PSEO came in $320,000 more than we budgeted. The teachers on call, it came in $200,000 more than we budgeted. Equipment and supplies was almost $1 million more, but again, about $250,000 of that was a scoreboard, which we have insurance recovery money to support that. One thing that we are going to be looking into is we spent about $700,000 more in transportation than what we budgeted. So we're trying to dig into that to see where that came from. And that makes up the majority of what the $6.5 million is. So we will be giving you a more detailed analysis of where we overspent. But the majority of it is going to be in special education, and then some of those that I just mentioned that we overspent. The auditors will plan to be here in October for the board meeting in October, so they'll give a detailed report. Again, they're making the final entries. I will be meeting with them next week to see if there's any comments that or findings that they're seeing so far. So I don't anticipate giving you much of an update on the September 9th board meeting, because again, it's just not done yet. But certainly in the September study session, I should have much more detail to give you, and we can do a lot more digging into the preliminary analytics. So that's what I have for the audit update.
Thank you, Tammy. I know that that's a lot of work, and looking forward to more of the detailed breakdown as it becomes more solidified.
Yes.
Next is you again for the levy certification update.
Yes, the levy certification, we had till last Friday to enter some of the preliminary data. We have to enter leases, we enter LTFM, long-term facilities maintenance information, we enter enrollment projections. We've got all of those done. The Department of Education will be running the first run of their levy certification and limitation report next Friday, which is September 6th. So I will try to get something to you by that Monday, September 9th board meeting. But again, it might be that September study session, as it's a 40-page report, and you have to like look at each line on there to make sure that all of the formulas are correct and match up what you anticipate seeing in there. So I will do my best to get you something on September 9th, but more than likely it will be a very detailed report on the September study session. And then on the October, we'll do a preliminary certification, and then have more conversations through November, and then December we'll have the truth and taxation hearing, and then you need to vote on the final certification. And in between there, we'll have a referendum vote.
Okay, and the enrollment update.
The enrollment update, I am happy to say that our kindergarten numbers are looking really good. We're about 62, this is as of last Friday, we have about 62 more kindergartners than what we initially thought we would have, which is great news. means we have about 140 more kids than what we originally projected. So that is good news, but we'll wait till next week to see who actually shows up, and then we'll have that official October 1st count. But so far, it's looking pretty good.
What does that
Across
put
the
us-
board.
Sorry, what does that put us at total for kindergarten?
We projected 496, and as of Friday, we have 558.
Sorry.
And the other,
Say it again,
we have 558.
I was just wondering, is that, like, are you seeing that pretty much generally across the elementary schools, or is it one?
Not
more than the
really.
other?
So kindergarten, there's 62 more, first grade, 5 more, second grade, 8 more, third grade, 13, 4 is 2, fifth grade has 1 more, sixth grade has 11, seventh grade has 6, eighth grade has 9 more, ninth grade has 10 more, 10th grade has 14 more, 11th grade actually has 6 less, and 12th grade has 10 more. So it's,
A net of 140
Yeah.
over projection.
Right, but I mean, in terms of like the kindergartners, because I know, like, what was
Oh,
it,
like
last
schools?
year? Yeah, like, I know last year, like, Loyola had its, was it last school year that they had their biggest kindergarten, or was it for this year?
Last year, we
Last
added
year,
a fifth
yeah.
section, yep.
I just wondered if that was the case.
sure.
It's a little bit across the board, but the
Okay.
2 schools that have seen the most growth in their kindergarten class compared to their first grade class is Five Hawks. Their kindergarten is at 72, where their first grade is at 66. And Glendale, their kindergarten is at 102, where their first grade is at 85. But we are seeing the kindergartners that are popping up, or seem to be popping up in all of our schools.
Weird to say kindergartners are popping up, but I'm glad they're appearing. Okay, so next we have proclamation. Find it in here. And, thank you. Well, actually, I was gonna ask you to read it.
I'll read it.
So thanks, I'll
Yeah.
hand it back.
Want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. This proclamation is for the Payroll Staff Appreciation Week, September 2nd through 6th, 2024. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes September 2 through 6th, 2024 as Payroll Staff Appreciation Week. Our payroll staff play a key role in managing the salaries and wages of our more than 1,300 staff. This week, we share our thanks and gratitude for these essential staff. Whereas Prior Lake Savage Area Schools has 2 full-time payroll staff, whereas payroll staff support Prior Lake Savage Area Schools staff through ensuring proper paychecks, including the management of over 11,000 retirement and voluntary deductions, whereas payroll staff manage 80% of the district's general fund budget, which amounts to a 90 million payroll budget for the fiscal year 2024 and 25. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to all Prior Lake Savage Area Schools payroll staff for their work supporting all employees and ultimately the success of our students, and proclaims September 2nd through 6th, 2024 to be Payroll Staff Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools.
Very much, Director Herman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bullion, for reading that, and members of the board for the proclamation. This is one of those areas that truly is a thankless job and unnoticed until there's an issue. But with the thousands of pieces of information that they go through meticulously to make sure that we have accurate payrolls every single year, every single other week astounds me. For 2 people doing that much information for that many employees. But on top of that, this year, as you know, we're working through the mandatory upgrade on Skyward. And so while they're doing this almost every other week, they're also working on upgrading our system to the point that the first full complete comparative payroll on the new system, they only had $26 difference.
Wow.
The vendor was blown away, first of all, the fact that they did a full complete. Usually people just choose to do a mini version of a payroll the first time. They did the whole thing. Time cards, stipends, everything. And the first time they were only $26 off, the second time they were only pennies off. And they were highly impressed by our individuals that, not just in payroll, but in the business office and HR and technology, that the proactive approach that they take to dig into issues and resolve them before they even come to the paycheck at the end of the day has been very wildly impressive from the whole team, and especially from our 2 payroll staff. So thank you very much for your appreciation. I know they appreciate it as well. And I will make sure to definitely pass that along.
Thank you, Director Herman. That's pretty amazing for 2 people. Very amazing. Next, we move on to policy, and Director Herman, that's you too. And first, we're going to start with policy 506 for student discipline. I'm not sure if you want to give a briefing on changes.
Yes, thank you, Chair Franz, members of the board. This policy is up for annual review, and there were also some slight legal changes based off of the changes with the school resource officer, and also just making sure we updated some different definitions throughout to make sure that we had the same names of policies were consistent, and the definition, different definitions throughout that need to be updated. There's no substantial changes, though. It was mainly cleanup around that, and updating for statutory changes around that for the school resource officer.
Are there any questions?
One question. Since we've developed a practice of linking policies within policies, you know what I mean? As I'm looking through here, and I might answer my own question when I get to the last page, because I don't know if we have we do have them listed on the back, okay. Okay, that answers my question. Because what I'm thinking of is that as you go through the violations and looking at like violation of school district's hazing prohibition policy, adding like the policy number, or is it fine just to have it listed below? You know what I mean?
I think it would be important for us to add the policy number, so thank you for noticing that. I will definitely make sure to
Because there's several
through
of them
and
where they, there's
update
several
that.
of them where you list it, but I think that would be helpful.
Yes, I completely agree. Thank you for calling it out. I will make sure to update that before bringing it forward to next meeting.
And then I have another question with all of these policies. Will these policies be going to the October, either the policy committee or the teaching and learning committee before they come back to the board for?
These have already been to the policy advisory committee.
Oh, they have.
They've already been, I can't speak to.
They were last year to teaching and learning.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, particularly with the 606 and 605, because I don't think we had a 605 606.5 last year, because that's driven mostly by legislation, if that will come back to the teaching and learning committee. So I guess we can talk about that when we get to that policy. So I have, those are all my comments in regard to the 506 and student discipline policy.
Okay, are there any other questions on the discipline policy? And I did want to ask one question. I noticed, and I'm not sure if this is just because of the changes, the cross-references are underlined here, so I assume those are hyperlinks when you go online, because some of them aren't always hyperlinks. On the last page, when you have review of policies and you list the statutes. So I'm hoping they are, because I like that.
The cross-references are
Yeah.
hyperlinks,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
I don't believe we have any hyperlinks on legal references, though.
No,
Just our
and that's
policies.
fine, I get it, but thank you. And no other questions by anybody? Okay, going on to policy 606.
So 606 and 606.5 will be difficult to look at separately because they used to be one policy. I'll ask Dr. Thomas and Dr. Edwards to join in here too. This is the policy that we started reviewing a year and a half ago with a task force to start digging into the policy and the procedures. And then also reviewing it multiple different times at Policy Advisory Committee, and then also, I believe, at Teaching and Learning as well. While that process was happening, we also had statutory changes that impacted these policies. So throughout that entire process, as we were going through it organically, it just became clearer as our previous policy that was joined together being very convoluted at times and difficult to process, to move forward with MSBA's recommendation to have the two, and also to make sure then we are in alignment with all of our statutory legal obligations, following that model policy from MSBA. Either Dr. Thomas or Dr. Edwards wants to.
And I would say that this was a singular policy. We had it, we just called it out as 1606. We didn't have a 0.5 broken out. That's really the main difference. We also had a lot of procedure tied into that, which we kind of thinned out as well after the MSBA model policy came around. So we briefed it in various groups as a totality of a policy. What you see here is bifurcated, which is the MSBA model, and cleaned up some language and cleaned up some of the protocols. We actually carried over some of that wasn't in the MSBA in ours, just because the committee felt that was really helpful. And I think that's the gist of the changes from the singular policy. Everything else stayed roughly the same from where we landed as our initial task force, and then through different iterations prior to the MSBA.
And the only additional comment I would make is specific to 606.5, because when we had reviewed that policy through the multiple processes over the last year and a half, that was not a policy that we had really ever had practice implementing. And as we did have practice implementing it once the spring of 22-23 school year, 22-23 school year, and twice last year in 23-24 school year, looking at the MSBA model policy and implementing and carrying it out, there's great alignment to how we carried it out. So that was another piece of the recommendation to bring this as the policy forward.
Okay. Questions?
I'm on 606. Section 5, the reconsideration. Under C, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. The superintendent shall present a procedure to the school board. Is that what's on the next page? Do I have that correct? Under, it says procedures. I just want to make sure that that's what this is referencing.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And then I have a question actually about the procedures. So when the language says procedures, any resident or employee of the school district may formally challenge textbooks and instructional materials. My mind goes to, what about a parent of an open enrolled student? Because you're talking about any resident or employee of the school district. So I feel like there could be a little bit of a miss, and maybe it needs to say any parent. I put parent and guardian is what I wrote down.
Yeah.
Parent,
Was
guardian.
was the language intentional around resident? Do you remember?
No, we don't. No, we would want to ensure that parent or guardian of an open enrolled student is just like a, in district. So
Yeah.
that should be part of that. They have the authority to call that into question.
And I just would want us to be consistent with how we define that in other policies, Emily.
Parent guardian.
Parent guardian or parent caregiver.
We've already changed those to parent
Oh,
guardian.
okay.
It's on our list of consistent
Yep.
reference, so
Yep.
we will work through that, yeah.
No, that was a good catch.
And then under 2, textbook and instructional materials review committee. I know we've talked about having in the actual, teaching and learning committee, having the 2/3 representations of parents and community members. I feel like on this list that the parent side is a little bit light, and wondering if it would hurt to go up to 4 parents or legal guardians from the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee, just to balance out that perspective of district employees' perspective versus parents.
Which number is that?
It's under
Two on the
procedures,
two.
it's on the back page.
Textbook and instructional materials.
606,
Mhm.
not 606.5.
And I'm wondering
Page
if there is a reason or statute behind 7 members, I don't know. But if, so it says, the committee shall be formed and shall consist of 7 members. Is that based in statute, that number of
The only-
members is just,
No, the only statute governs the size of the overall teaching and learning advisory.
okay.
And this is reflective of our practice,
Mhm.
and in the practice that we went through 4 times, 5 times,
Sure.
that operated well, so that's what you see here. That's what's reflected.
And aligned with 606.5, the review committee that would be established for library materials as well.
Yeah, and I called that, I have that as a note on 606.5, just because, you know, everybody brings a different perspective. But I think having a healthy balance between parents and district employees, I have found on the Teaching and Learning Committee to be, bring about more robust conversation. So I don't know if it would hurt for us to up it to 4 parents from the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee.
I'm comfortable with how it is, my opinion. I think the representation from the people that are using, you know, teaching with the curriculum and using the textbooks and materials are pretty well informed.
Wouldn't it be the parents that would be challenging it potentially? I mean, I hear what you're saying, they're informed, right, but if there is a challenge and it needs to go to a review committee, I just want to ensure that the parent's perspective is represented fairly from from an equity standpoint or whatever.
Well, and hearing from a broader group of parents, I can see how that could bring value. And then another thought that pops into my head is the bigger the committee that could potentially bring about its own, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say challenges.
That's complexity, and the larger the group.
Yeah, the larger, you know,
consensus
the
and
larger the
perspective, yeah.
group, you know, my question would be, would that help reach consensus, or would, you know, I do see value in having more.
It could help with buy-in too. I mean, it could help.
It could help fostering trust, it could help, and I can also see where there could be complexities, that's a good word, so.
Well, we're pulling from one committee too, and I'm wondering how do you determine that pulling from one committee is gonna have diversity, though? That's the thing.
What's pulling?
It's pulling from the teaching and learning.
Yeah, it comes from Teaching and Learning, yes.
Which is a limited size committee too, so.
Well, we have,
I'm fine, it seemed to work pretty well last year.
I don't know if this is a spot where, is this a spot where we do find the will of the board?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes.
thumbs?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the
Well,
first
not
reading.
thumbs,
it's the first reading, yeah, so they'd
Yeah, it's
come
the
back
first
to
reading.
reread it.
Have you had many challenges on the textbooks or classroom materials?
Not today.
Or has there been was there any like feedback after the reviews that you did have last year? Was there any reviews of the determination or the?
Limited, very limited, I would say.
And what about, Dan, remind me of getting parents to participate?
That wasn't challenging because I had a target audience of the teaching and learning committee
Yeah.
to hear people from.
Point of clarification, now we've added parent or slash legal guardian, that can formally challenge. Is that person or persons included in these two parents slash legal guardians? They're not part of the committee, right?
No, correct.
Okay.
Presumably.
To
It
be,
could be.
Yeah,
I
suppose
suppose
it could happen. Yeah.
Could be a teacher, could be, yeah. Unlikely.
So can we,
Yeah,
with,
can I,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, can we kind of figure out the direction we're giving to Director Herman here? Are we gonna, since are we gonna stick with 7 members, or are we gonna increase?
Can I ask this, just, can we say something like at least 2 parents, giving the flexibility depending on,
That would be fine
Does
with
that-
me. I don't know what everybody else feels about that.
we kind of wordsmithed around specificity on another portion of this, of a certain role, and we didn't want to commit it to a role, but we said could be. So I'm just trying to think of ways to, if that's the will of the board, if you want to go that direction, or if you're holding with what we have from our past practice, you know, last year of going through this with this committee, so.
I mean, you could do that, the problem is then you could have like 6,
Mhm.
10, yeah.
Or you could put a cap too, like at least up to.
Well, I mean, it could be 2 to 4 parents.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Slash legal,
Right.
you know. I don't see any harm in doing that. I don't know if we want to keep
Can we
going.
kind of go around the room and see where people are, starting with Director Olsted, on what it says right now? Do you want it more or less changed, given flexibility?
I'm fine with leaving it as is.
I'd like to leave it as is.
Dr. Atkinson?
I'd like to see a 2 to 4 to balance out to the statute that actually, not that this would have to do with statute, but then it would align with the 2/3 parents and community members of the teaching and learning committee. So we're very consistent of the balance between parents' perspectives versus district employee perspectives. So I'd be comfortable with 2 to 4. I'd be more comfortable with 4.
Director Velasquez?
I'm more inclined to actually offer a third opinion.
Oh, I love that.
Giving the flexibility to the review committee based on the complexity or the sensitivity of the specific material being reviewed. So at least the 7, it could be more. Depends on what's the nature of the specific material that's being challenged.
Would that also, when you said with flexibility, you know, we have bullet points of the descriptions of the people. Were you thinking of bringing in another description based upon the needs of the committee? I mean, I'm trying to figure out where your threshold is.
Sure. I think in terms of the roster, I think it's right. More of how many people, how many voices, content area teachers or subject matter experts who can lend their insight into the specific area, and then of course balancing with parents and legal guardians, depending on what level of complexity.
So could you say consist of at least 7 members, or at least 9, whatever, where we land on that, you know what I mean? That would cover, that would allow for movement up. I agree with you, I think it's
And
okay.
up to? At least and up to?
Sounds like it's in that same space.
At least enough to 7. That's kind
At
of,
least 7 and up.
At least 7 up to,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's what
Another
I,
number.
well, that's, yeah.
Right.
And not specifying where it shows up in the bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's one way, okay. Director Burnick?
I just had no less than 2, but up to whatever you want to do.
as far as parent represent, or teaching and learning, but.
I would be comfortable with doing the 2 to 4 parent/legal guardians.
I'm kind of comfortable leaving where it is since it worked last year, and also, if we come into a situation where it's not working and we do get feedback, then I think we should make a change, but I'm worried that if we leave it with any type of language like that, then we're particularly given the passion of some of the challenges, I just don't want to turn it into a discussion each time. That's, you know, and if it comes up that it's not working, then I think we change it. But if there's no problem with the way it is right now, and it seemed to work well last year, then I'm fine leaving it. That's kind of where I am.
So, sounds like there's 4 that would like to have the parameters of the at least up to tonight, so we can go back and rework that. I would kind of build up what you said, Chair. I don't think I want to go through the litany of roles each time. I definitely would be more comfortable saying this is where we'll put it. And right now, and balancing it, I think the logic of balancing against the T&L roster is defensible logic. It's aligned in statute, so I would put it there as the at least up to. And then that gives us the 7 to 9.
Just for the second bullet.
Just for the second bullet.
Okay.
So it would say consist of at least 7 members up to 9, and then the second bullet would say up, or at least 2 parents up to 4. So
Okay.
that's where we would put it.
I'm okay with that.
That's where
I like the
flexibility-
That's where the
specificity.
flexibility is.
Yeah, I like the specificity. I
so
don't
we'll do
want to,
that.
yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, the next one is 606.5.
I don't have anything additional to add. I kind of covered both of them as one, so just a reminder that there has been some statutory changes that have impacted this policy, so that is included in here as well. But really, as Dr. Edwards and Dr. Thomas said, aligning this policy with MSBA model policy and with the procedures that we have utilized over the last year and a half when implementing the previous policy.
I noticed under the review committee, there's not a board member, as there has been in the past.
That's
Correct, I had that note as well.
good catch. Yes, that's it. It must not be in the MSBA model.
Oh,
But
true.
it has been in our.
But I know we've done, yeah.
Yep.
And I think that was, I believe, like 606 says at, designated by the chairperson of the Board of Education.
Right.
I think that should be in there as well.
We'll add that back, yeah.
It has to be consistent.
Yep, same as the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so does that change under E then?
The two-
D,
the
2E.
The at least
With the
2
at
up
least
to,
and up to.
yeah.
Yeah, same
We'll keep
language.
that consistent. We'll mirror that from 606.
So I just have a question.
And I'm sorry, we're only talking about, I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. We're only talking about 2E?
Two.
D2E.
Yes, yes.
D2E?
Where it says 2 members of the teaching and learning.
Oh,
To make
I'm
that
sorry.
consistent with the other one.
Under
Yep.
reconsideration,
Mhm.
am I reading this right, that under section 4, D the school board may decline to purchase, lend, or shall or remove access to library materials legitimately based on these three criteria. Is that new language that we've had, or was that in 6.0?
This is new statutory language that is in the MSBA's model policy that we are recommended to include to make sure that we're including the statutory language that has changed.
So a school board could remove any books from a library under this?
Under those reasons in compliance with state and federal law, yes.
Are you, Dr. Crosby, you're under 4?
Section 4D.
I think
The
it's
school board may decline to purchase,
Yeah,
lend,
okay.
or shelve or remove access.
Yeah, good call out, because I feel like if that's the case, why do we have a review committee?
Well, that's different. I mean, the
Yeah.
review committee may bring a recommendation to the board, right?
I
Or
see,
to a
like it would happen
superintendent.
first.
It's on the
Right,
shelf.
it goes to existing book, and we have budget oversight, so it's drawing the line.
Statutorily, it also says that we as a school board, we oversee the textbooks. And I think textbooks can be defined as library books, and that's where
Well,
the
There's-
textbooks come in.
that's different.
Separated.
Yeah,
here.
that-
Yeah,
But
they're
then-
separated.
Yeah, that is separate now, for sure.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that I think that's, like Emily said, it's being driven by statute, because it is written in the statute of what a school board's responsibility is.
And it's also part of some recent changes.
Right, exactly.
To library selections, based off of recent statutes that have changed. So as we've talked a little bit at Policy Advisory Committee, and I think we mentioned it here at a few different times, that's legal guidance from MSBA's resources that they have in their model policy that I would recommend that we keep in there to make sure that we're statutorily in compliance.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
My only question, again, I know this is lifted. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. Legitimate pedagogical concerns. My definition of legitimate is going to be different than yours and yours and yours. Like, how do we define legitimate?
And does it,
Majority of the board.
and then I guess I have a question. Would it have to go through the process for the board to remove, or could the board just remove? Or decline to purchase, lend, whatever the words are.
Decline to purchase is the word the discussion was, but again, we're gonna see some court action. Probably gonna define
Like, does
this.
it, my point is, does it have to go through a review process before it comes to the board or not? Okay, it reads like it doesn't. Yeah, so
I
I'm
guess
just
maybe
trying to
that was
fully
what my point
understand that.
was. Yeah.
Because I'm not trying to open a can of worms here, I'm truly just trying to understand it. And if
Yeah.
the statute is saying that a board can do that, that's what the statute is saying, the board reserves the right.
So the new statute, and again, we're all trying to still pick it apart and
Okay.
figure it out, and how is it actually written and intended versus what it's gonna look like, because this is from May 2024 legislation.
Yep.
Is that there needs to be multiple steps that are followed while selecting library material, including the expertise of the media specialist being a part of that decision-making process. But it also still does provide avenues for other, the ultimate authority at the end of the day coming to the board level.
Okay.
So it has caused confusion because there's pieces of the statute that state the responsibility or authority or a different terminology lies on the media specialist in selecting materials. But then it also still recognizes and acknowledges the school board's ultimate authority on budget and other aspects of it. So we're still trying to weave out how that's all going to interplay with each other. Ultimately, I don't see that changing our processes here because we already have a review process in place for our budget, for our curriculum, for our library materials, and for them to, for individuals to challenge them and bring them forward, and we've successfully worked through that process already. And as we learn more about what happens after this mandate, or the statute came through, maybe we'll have more answers to how to define these different terminologies that have been out there, but I unfortunately don't know much more than that. Dan?
No.
Or sorry, Dr.
No, I
Edwards?
appreciate all that.
I don't think we do in carrying this out, and I think just like any other policy, there are steps preceding that step, and it also, in this case, gives the authority to
Well, it gives
go
local
to that
control
step.
here, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, unusual these days. Yeah.
A little bit.
Okay.
Now, if the purchase of those materials exceeded $25,000 and we saw it come through on the consent agenda, then, that would be kind of an opportunity to daylight that. So what's this all about? I don't imagine we'll have anything that reaches that.
Not for a library book, hopefully not.
So they're not that big.
That will be really weird.
Sorry to go backwards, but something I noticed too, and I apologize for not bringing it up before. When we talk about 606.
Before we leave 606, can we finish on 606.5?
Please.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
So I had one question on there, Roman numeral 7, where it talks about the outcomes that will come before the school board, what the final decision is, and then the requester will receive the disposition, and they also have the right to appeal. I don't see anything in here indicating that they'll actually publish what the outcome is for the broader community to have a sense of.
So we actually do have that in 606, because that was something that brought up in policy committee, that we would have a running record of that. So we just need to lift that language from 606, again, as we split. That,
I do believe that we did talk about not putting it in there because of separating out the procedures versus policy aspect of it, and how and where we communicate that is more procedural than policy. That was my recollection of the policy advisory committee conversation around that, but.
When we do reference 606 in the cross-references.
yeah.
Well, we have procedures in 606.
We do, but it's about not duplicating language if you cross-reference it, because when I first started in the policy committee, one of our goals was to eliminate the duplication as much as possible. If we mention it once, it's still in policy, and then you do the cross-reference. That way, when they go to update, it makes the update process a lot more efficient.
No, that's good.
That was the discussion, but that is something that we'll be putting onto our website. So
Public notices.
in public notices, so I do apologize. I thought it was a discussion we had, I thought it was in 606, but that was just one that we discussed.
Well, I would assume that the challenger's identity would be kept confidential. Is that correct? I mean,
Yeah,
as these challenges come
so,
forward, that the-
yeah, so when we would publish like a book that was challenged, we're not publishing the name of the challenger, we're just publishing the book itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that the committee was formed,
Right,
is a
right.
recommendation of the committee as
Now,
such.
now, again, when a challenge comes in, that information is subject to a data request. So anybody can request that information, but we're not openly publishing that information.
Right, you'd still be redacting the name, I'm assuming, just as we've done in the past.
It would depend on who the challenger was and what role they played.
No.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope. One for 606.
Okay, we'll keep it on this side of the table then. So just having gone through this with the Teaching and Learning Committee, I just noted, I went back to my notes through that committee and noted a couple things that I am just gonna talk about that came straight out of that committee. The first thing on the very first page, under 606.5, number 2, under general statement of purpose, the language about that our district supports the Library Bill of Rights adopted by the American Library Association, I believe that the feedback on that was challenged because the Library Bill of Rights, if you check out a book through the library cannot reveal what type of book you checked out. It's like a confidentiality phrase or something in the Library Bill of Rights. And that would be almost impossible as a school district for us to do. If a parent or a kid, or a student checked out a book, then a parent should have access to knowing what that book is, or if they inquired or whatever. So that came up in the Teaching and Learning Committee about, because we're really truly not a library. I get what we're trying to respect, I get what we're trying to do, but I think what we've defined in policy does feed back to what the Library Bill of Rights accomplishes or states or whatever. But it also keeps us out of like a dual conflict of interest with what is stated in the Library Bill of Rights.
I'm not tracking.
I'm not either.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay, no, it's okay. So the Library Bill of Rights is, it's a bill, but it's really designed for libraries. And like, if you go check out a book, I can't walk into the library and say, who checked out this book? They're gonna say that's confidential, you know? But in our school district, a parent should be able to know what book their child checked out if they inquire. So we are, I think the fact is that we are not a library. We are a school district. So there's different, you go back and read the Library Bill of Rights, there's things in it that would not apply to our school district.
So I'm reading the general premise of the Library Bill of Rights is to implement district policies and procedures in schools to ensure equitable access to resources and services for all students, as adopted on July 2nd, 1986. And then the American Library Association is the intellectual freedom and expectations. So as a school district and for minors, I'm not quite sure that's really going to conflict because parents can, it's their
Maybe we
kid,
need some
so-
legal clarity on that.
I can read this section here. If you Library Bill of Rights. 7, all people regardless of origin, age, background, or views possess a right to privacy and confidentiality in their library use. Libraries should advocate for, educate about, and protect people's privacy, safeguarding all library use data, including personally identifiable information.
But
So it's that specific
That's that
element.
specific
and
element.
does
where it
that
conflicts with
cover
parents.
minors?
It-
For parents?
It's
it
everybody.
does- Yeah, it's ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I think it is.
It really is, yeah.
Does it apply to Google?
I'm trying to remember.
So
The
statutorily,
reference
we have to
statute.
have a statement in our policy. And that was the statement that we had previously used in order to meet that statute. So I can look into what, I can look into that concern a little bit more from a legal perspective. But when we talked about it at the Policy Advisory Committee, it was simply this is what was already in our policy, so let's just carry it forward so that we can meet that statutory requirement of having a statement.
So we need to find out if we need to have it, and if we need to have it, what
I
does
know
that
we
mean?
need to have it.
have one.
I
What
know we
does it-
statutorily need to have it.
Okay.
If we're not going to utilize that exact language, I need to know what legally we can or cannot use.
And I didn't see that in the MSBA model policy, so I would just maybe
I
double.
think they have it worded differently where they're
Yeah.
not citing specifically the
The Bill of-
Library Bill of Rights.
correct, they're not
but they
citing
have
the
the
Bill of Rights.
language all in there.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part is actually stating the Library Bill of Rights. So maybe we can go back and look at what
Okay.
MSBA.
We'll take a look at that.
Okay, and then,
And I do know, just, again, I want to completely respect the board's authority here. I just also want to make sure I'm the voice with the Policy Advisory Committee. I do know that was a piece that the Policy Advisory Committee all agreed upon and wanted to put back in there. So I just want to put that out there for you all so that you know that that was a piece that was discussed and the committee did ask for that to be added back in.
Yeah, it was brought up I remember that being brought up, and I will say from my perspective, not knowing that exact language as far as privacy for all, I too would prefer to look into the MSBA verbiage, because of parents.
There's language right in the thing saying we affirm, Library Bill of Rights, we affirm the responsibility and right of all parents and guardians to guide their own children's use of the library and its resources. Libraries and their governing bodies cannot assume the role of parents or the functions of parental authority in the private relationship between parent and child. Libraries and governing bodies shall ensure that only parents and guardians have the right and responsibility to determine their children's and only their children's access to library resources. Parents and guardians who do not want their children to have access to specific library materials and services or facilities should then advise the governing body. And governing body should not use a rating system to inhibit a minor's access to materials is the last statement. So parents or guardians of minors supersede, which is what yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. It's clearly stated in here. They make and they refer to statute and all that in there, multiple actual statute, as well as privacy and interpretation of Library Bill of Rights by the American Library Association Council and everything like that, that when it comes to school districts, it clearly states that it will not come between a parent and a child.
Good to know.
And is that addressed in 606.5, section 6, paragraph?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's exactly right. So then I would question why does the other part have to be stated? Because like I said, I knew that came out of teaching and learning. That was one of my, because we're not a library, basically, we're a school district.
I don't think it distinguishes between the two here. It just says basically for parents and guardians. It doesn't say whether the library is in the school district or not. It basically just states that parents have rights over their own child and only their child.
We'll confirm with legal on that statement, and if that's there and that,
Yeah, I'd like to also understand why MSBA doesn't have it in there versus.
let us do some digging.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then under 5, selection of library materials, this was a point that was brought up multiple times and had a lot of great discussion. Jess, I'm sure you remember this. But under the selection of library materials, the question was that the statement was, the selection should follow other district policies, including the electronic device internet policy. Where in that, I think it's 424, I think it is. Let me just grab my notes here. I have my pile of teaching and learning notes.
You're in section 5A?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I'm in section 5A. Apologize for not saying that. So, and then we even got, I don't know if everybody on the board got this, but it was an email sent from to Dan Edwards. But basically what it says is that if you link, if we were to link policy 5.
What she said.
I can't find
where you read from.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Under 5, selection of library materials. So it's basically like saying these are the guidelines that the library, these are the guidelines of the selection process should result in a library collection that when considered as a whole is consistent with the following criteria. And this is that criteria.
Yep.
And what was discussed in the committee was that in our 524 electronic technology and acceptable use policy, we use very descriptive language about the unacceptable use. So selection should follow other district policies, including the electronic device internet policy, because basically the thought is in the 524 policy, we list number 1, pornographic, obscene, or sexually explicit material or other visual depictions that is harmful to minors. And so you probably remember this conversation, Jess. But the conversation was, if we can define it in one policy, why can't we define it in this policy? And being consistent across, basically like, we're gonna protect the minds of our children, when they're looking at things on the internet and specific to pornographic, obscene, or sexually explicit material, or other visual depictions that's harmful to minors, that the request was to put it into the, well, at that time it was the book policy, or, you know, it wasn't this book policy, but it was that 606 policy. So see how it goes.
Yeah, and I think the broader context around that too, and sorry, I'm dusting my brain off. I remember the conversation, but defining pornographic material, and that's the distinction. Like, we don't own the content that a kid would access on the internet. We own content in our libraries, and we don't buy pornography. And that was the distinction of language of pornography, you know, adult website access. They're not gonna do that in our libraries. That was the part of the conversation that I recall too, of the broader context. Because in the statute, what was it? I'm trying to think of what was it, a statute, or was it something, I don't think it was any of our policies. There was something with the state of Minnesota and how they define this in literary forms. What am I trying to think of? Was that a state statute? I can't recall. That was the bigger context that came in. So that's what I recall in addition to that, of why that wasn't listed here, because that tech policy pertains to literary or resources that we don't own that are coded as adult website or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I might not
Same
have the
thing,
right
the
words.
internet's adult gambling, whatever, all the way down.
I mean, I think the challenge is that they don't really rate books, you know, so how do we keep inappropriate content out of our district? And we're talking like highly inappropriate. We're not just talking about some book that maybe you and I don't disagree on as perspectives. So that's what we talked about in the Teaching and Learning Committee, is actually writing in the same language that we have in the 524.
Since they do rate books for different grade levels, age levels, all that kind of stuff, and because we're depending on the media specialist to review that, is that sufficient? Because the media specialists
that's why
are
that doesn't
licensed,
exist
right.
here.
Okay.
I'm not saying that wasn't the conversation, that didn't happen, but I'm just saying that's the logic of why that's not
And
here.
that
Why
makes
it's not
sense.
included in the model policy.
Correct.
I would also expand on that. I think Director Atkinson, to get to that point, we would rely heavily on 5A, number 4, where we'd be able to dig into those different areas, where to your, your comment about the highly inappropriate stuff, that's where we've leaned into that. And as Dr. Edwards stated earlier, there has been materials that have been removed, that these changes wouldn't have changed that outcome, that material still would have been removed because of it being in violation of 5A4. I think, and from my perspective, given the difference in text, the different state and federal definitions of what is in text versus what is on TV or on the internet, I would recommend we stick with the MSBA's model policy, because this gives us a broader flexibility when the different levels, relying on the different complexities of it, whereas the internet use is just a little bit more straightforward from a legal standpoint, in my opinion.
And I was happy to see that written in there because of the ages, the maturity level, because I think that does help to define it, where we may have been a little bit more loose in the past of that. But so okay, that's fine. I just wanted to share that. And then under 5, selection of library materials, and it would be under B. The library media specialist shall consult sources and specialists experienced in library materials collections. Is it possible to somehow say shall consult 3 sources, 2 sources? I think oftentimes we all know that there's different sources with different viewpoints for book reviews. And some sources are gonna say this is appropriate for this age level, and some sources are gonna say it's not appropriate. So I think having an unbiased perspective of looking at multiple sources, or we could even just use the word shall consult multiple sources, would ensure that our library specialists are doing, giving it sort of an unbiased approach.
Sources,
We need,
plural, is more than one, but, so multiple sources, I think, says the same thing, but sources is more than one. So,
And it specifically states that are reputable, experienced, unbiased, they specifically
Yeah.
state in there.
yeah,
And professionally trained in school library materials. So that
I
pretty
think we
much
get
covers
that
it.
bias
Yeah.
piece and multiples in the plurals.
Mm-hmm.
And specialists is plural, so I think we, I mean, when I just think about, when I think about our conversation with the media specialists, they're working as teams also. They're not working in isolation, and they're conveying, various book review sites. So I know our staff have talked about that.
Yes.
Okay,
So,
no, that's
yeah.
fine.
Okay.
And appreciate that,
Yeah.
meaning that the sources,
Yeah,
references multiple. Then under number 7, reconsideration of specific library materials. There, I'm wondering if the language of the people involved on doing the requesting should be consistent with the policy we just looked at, 606, where we said, I can't find it now, where we just talked about how it should be not,
Resident,
resident,
guardian.
parent, guardian, that kind of thing, but ensure, it's the same as under procedures 1, any resident, parent, guardian, or employee of the school district may formally.
Well, this one, it does say
This
a
one
school
says-
district employee, student, or a parent or legal guardian of a school district student.
I think what doesn't say is resident, that's the
So
difference.
we did have this discussion at the Policy Advisory Committee, and this specifically, the feedback from the Policy Advisory Committee did ask how far we can go with restricting, and so I did seek advice on that, and it's really up to the school board on how far you can either allow or not allow this to occur. The feedback from the Policy Advisory Committee was that there was a hope from some to only allow those that have a direct impact at that site to be able to challenge, and not to be able to have somebody that doesn't have a direct impact at that site to be able to limit the materials for students, the broad students. So limiting it to, we kept the language and we didn't limit it any further than it already was. But that was part of the discussion at the Policy Advisory Committee, was to limit it even more. We didn't, we stuck with what was in the model policy with school district employee, student, or parent/legal guardian, and not make it they had to have a connection to that school site. But that was, I don't know, Director Bullion, if you want to add any more about that conversation, or Dr. Thomas and Dr. Edwards, I know you're all there too.
I'm having a hard time recollecting.
Yeah, it was where there was conversation about, can we limit it to that you have to have a student at that site?
that's
Or
where
you
we
have
started.
to be a
That's where we
student
started.
at that site. And we, administration, asked us to be able to look into that, because we didn't know if we could limit it that far or not. I did get feedback back that we were able, the board can limit it even further, but it's really up to the board and the policy and whether or not. We did not include that recommendation from the Policy Advisory Committee in this policy to limit even further. We kept it as is, but that was feedback from the Policy Advisory Committee. We felt leaving it with the district employee, student, or parent/legal guardian of the school district still allowed those that have an impact in the system. Because one thing we didn't want to take away is, like, if you have a 5th grader and you know a book is in middle school and you want to challenge that for reconsideration before your student's there, that makes sense. I also can understand the feedback from the Policy Advisory Committee on if we have a resident that doesn't have any students in school, then limiting library access to students in school didn't seem appropriate to them. So that, just a summary of the conversation that occurred around that topic. But again, I don't.
Yeah, it was
Dr. Thomas?
an internal stakeholder. That was the will of the committee, that, as Emily just stated, that was essentially it.
I'm not saying I like this or agree with it, but
if any resident can walk in off the street and challenge a textbook, what's the difference? I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm just saying, because I actually like how it's written, but if we're saying anybody can walk in, whether they have a student, and I guess if you're looking at it as, you know, public school, taxpayer dollars, all of that, if you want to go down that road, if any resident can walk in and say, I challenge this textbook in this math class, or this English class, or whatever, what's the difference?
Could that?
Putting it out to the group.
Yeah, and could it possibly
That was my
be, I mean, I agree with you, Jess, but could it possibly be a parent who doesn't have a kid in the district that is like maybe looking to put him in the district? Or could it be a grandparent? Well, you know, I mean, I think that's where, I think resident, I get the challenge, I fully understand it. I think you said it very clearly that the taxpayers and, I was looking for consistency. We did it in one, so why wouldn't we do it in the other?
I just want to offer why we might be inconsistent there. I think this would be aligned with the spirit of the conversations, that when we're talking about library materials, those are truly optional materials as compared to curricular materials that are not.
Yep, that makes sense.
So, a broader
No, that's
I think
completely
that's a
fair.
big
That
distinction.
is a big distinction.
Yeah, it is. So it makes a lot of difference. And, yeah, I prefer it the way it is. I don't think we should broaden it. And I do agree with, Danny said it very well.
Can we get a quick pulse?
So how are we with, the section, 7B?
As is or add residents?
Yeah, as is or add residence.
I'm fine with it as is.
Okay.
As is.
As is. As is. Director Atchison, Director Velasquez?
Oh, I'd like to see add resident as taxpayers in our district.
So would I.
Well, we've got the.
That's fine. Yeah, yes,
majority
I
is
understand.
to
I
not put
appreciate
it in
that.
there, so leave
Thank
it
you,
as
good
is.
discussion, appreciate that, yeah.
And then I just have, I promised 2 more things. Just, we put a lot of time into this policy, so there's a lot to cover. Our last policy, the review committee was subject to open meeting law, and that's not stated in here. So are we making a change in that?
I don't think it was.
It is still open, and we did have a conversation at Policy Advisory Committee on that as well, and determined as well that was a procedural thing, so to not put it into policy. But that was another conversation on Policy Advisory too, was the hope or the advocacy, whatever
Was
you want to say,
open.
to leave it remained open.
They will remain open.
The only reason we didn't get added was because procedure versus policy. But
Oh, okay.
But open meeting law really doesn't apply.
wasn't
because
it's not open meeting law.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just like
it
the
doesn't
exact
apply.
team
It's
meeting
just
aren't
we're
open
leaving it
because of
open.
open meeting
Yeah.
law, they're
Yeah.
open because of district policy.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And procedure, so, but up to the board if we want to add that or not.
I think it's fine in procedure.
I'd like to keep it in procedure just because I think it's helpful for even community members to come in and hear different perspectives that they may not understand.
Yeah, it's there. Definitely.
Then the last thing, I promise. So if a specific library material is the subject of formal, oh, I'm sorry. Going under, this policy's too long. I couldn't believe how long this policy is. So 4, 5, 6, 7. I am under number 7D, it looks like.
Formal request.
7, yeah. But the second, well, it's the number 1, second paragraph. If a specific library material is the subject of a formal request for reconsideration and a final decision is made to retain the specific library material, then the specific library material shall not be subject to additional requests for consideration for 3 calendar years following the date of the final resolution. Is that statutory, or is that something that's driven by our board? And
This is not statute, but it's just to prevent an annual challenge of the same thing that gets challenged the year before or 6 months prior or whatever, so that we're not going through it. So there's a lot of time dedicated to going through this process, and so we were determining what is the window of appropriateness that we would have a book kind of reviewed, and that's how we landed there, so that we're not constantly doing the same review for the same book over and over and over again. Hasn't happened, but we're trying to prevent that. So.
I respect that 3 years in the calendar year of the life of a child who's in our district for 12 kind of feels kind of big. So I don't know, I would like to see that tightened up to maybe 2 calendar years. But I mean, 3 years, you could have a kid entering middle school and go all the way through middle school. You know what I mean? So,
I don't know that if it helps or not, but one conversation that we did have at Policy Advisory Committee, not specific to this section of it, but it may relate for you, Director Atkinson, is that in that situation, what's really important is the individual ability to remove access for their student.
Yeah,
So should an individual challenge a book for all students and that doesn't have the outcome that they were maybe hoping for, they could still utilize that process to limit it for their own students. In that interim, should they want to challenge it again in 3 years. So I do think that there is that fail-safe there for the individual parent or the guardian to still remove access for their student or students.
You're 606.
Thank you. Almost forgot. So our media policy has student representatives. Is this something to consider for if a textbook or an instructional material is challenged?
To be in the roster?
To be in the roster?
Oh, I think it says it, F2 student representatives as appropriate to the specific request.
For the library, I'm looking
Oh,
at
you're saying for
606.
the other one, oh,
Yes.
okay.
I think the similar rationale to what I gave in the last answer would apply in this scenario, in that curricular decisions are made for all intents and purposes by adults versus students make optional choices with regard to materials. I think that's the rationale that I would give to apply here for a difference between the two.
So Director Olstad, were you approaching it from the perspective of providing more of like the student experience versus, or into the decision-making? What were your thoughts there?
I guess to me, and I completely agree with that. This is an adult decision. I just, our CPM curriculum, right, fresh in our minds, and we had a lot of very valid student input from the kiddos that were experiencing it. And I think, I just don't want their voice to be lost in if something is being challenged, or, and they could say, yeah, challenge it, I hate it, whatever. Or they could just, this doesn't bother me and here's why, or I don't know, and maybe it depends on the age, right? I think a kindergartner, probably not so much, but a senior or a middle schooler where they do have opinions on what they're taught, how they're taught, with what they're being taught with. And maybe it's something to consider for our next reading. That stood out to me. That
we go through.
I know they don't have a choice, right? And I think that's valid.
And to your point though, with the developmental age of the student, they do participate in that process. Maybe not so much on the challenge side, but like the adoption side, we're gaining perspective. they're completing survey data on, you know, I mean, in a formal way, they're doing observational data from a teacher to see how, you know, my students might be responding. So they're involved in it there. You know, I don't think we're prevented from talking to students if a curriculum gets challenged to go out and just say, okay, let's understand this a little bit, like we can do that.
Feedback.
That's part of our investigation around a challenge, but I don't know if we would necessarily mandate that they be a part of that process from the kind of adult standards-driven curricular choice in an adoption that we make, that we are challenged, that's being challenged. But as a pilot, on the front side, when we're piloting, yeah, they're involved in that.
Right,
Directly.
100%, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Any more discussions on 606 or 606.5?
Thank you all for the perspectives.
Thank you. Let's move on to public data requests.
So 722 is in review and also part of the 700s that we're going over this year. There is no substantial changes, it's just cleanup with a slight addition to match the MSBA model policy that we did previously have in there. That's all.
So no other changes except for the light green that's in there, and that's not substantive. All right, any questions?
Discussion.
Okay. With that, I'm going to move on to superintendent relations.
Just really quickly, I sent a briefing to all the board last week. It was ahead of time, so the timing, when I said the 26th at our last board meeting, we were communicating to families ahead, so you got that communication, that update prior to tonight. So you've seen where we're at moving forward with protocols at the high school. The only other thing I would add is that, no, that was it, sorry. Different topic. So you all have seen that last Friday.
Okay, informational items.
Welcoming all of our staff back tomorrow. If any of you can make it through, would love to have all of you there, that we do every year. So it's breakfast at 7:30 and welcome at 8 o'clock. Get you out of there by 11.
Bring your
No, I'm
money,
kidding.
bring your money for the Lakers.
Oh yeah, Laker gear, you can buy that as well. But like 8 to 9 is kind of the bulk of the program, and yeah.
And then future agenda topics. Does anybody have any future agenda topics?
One to consider. Certainly not a rush, but we unfortunately had to touch on it the last couple of meetings with our moments of silence. We've had just a lot of tragedy, just especially in the last couple of years. And I know we have a policy already for student/staff memorials. It's 531. I just didn't know if there was, and I know I don't know when that particular policy is up for review. I didn't look at that part of it, but I didn't know, you know, is there some kind of formality that we can put on acknowledging and honoring and paying tribute to, you know, students or staff that we lose? Maybe not. Maybe that particular policy covers it with what we need to do. I personally really appreciate when we honor them at the beginning of meetings, and yes, it's a moment of silence and wish we could do more. But I didn't know if that was something we wanted to discuss on kind of putting some formality behind that. It's just weighing a lot on me the last couple of years that I've gone to too many funerals, and and maybe there's nothing else we can do, and maybe that's it, and that's completely fair. I didn't know if that was something that we could talk about how.
So I would have to defer to Director Herman and Dr. Thomas about the one policy we have about putting up memorials and all that, because I think that is a little different from what I recall.
Right, those are more for memorials.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and money spent and where it goes and all that kind of stuff. But right now, we started the process, but we haven't memorialized the process as part of our policy to say that we're going to do this, and the procedure for making sure that we've checked with their parent or guardian.
Right.
To make sure, as
So-
well as setting that scope of
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
student or existing staff.
So the request on the table for the will of the board to add for the future agenda, to not get into it, is procedure aspects of 531, is what I'm wondering, is the question.
I don't know if it's 531
Or
Yeah.
whatever that
Or
policy
an
is. Sorry.
extension of it,
Yeah.
or, because I'm not talking about like physical memorials,
Right.
because that's more what 531 is.
Parameters and procedures around
Around the-
memorializing.
Around the death of a student of
Or
our staff.
At the board, or
What we do
existing
at the board
staff.
level.
Mhm.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we could put that on.
Is that a question, or is that the will that you guys want to bring that forward as
I would
a?
be fine discussing that at a future board meeting, study session.
I agree too.
Is it, because I've been doing it now, and I know we've talked about it, I think since you came on board, is it okay to continue doing it the way we've been doing it? Does anybody have an issue with that?
or
No, but we can put it on a meeting. to
That's,
discuss.
yeah, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that because we're putting on a
Continuing.
meeting, I
Continuing,
don't wanna.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
Basically, I've been really, I like that.
Yeah.
I want to memorialize it a little.
Good idea.
Okay.
For in posterity.
One, it guides how we do it too, so that's helpful.
Thank you.
I don't, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
I just had a couple things. I'm wondering if we, regarding our conversation earlier about our board evaluation, do we need to circle back and work on like setting our goals for the year as a school board? And how those goals align to the strategic plan? And would that go to another study session?
You know, that's a good question, because we didn't actually finish what we normally do, and we do usually set goals for ourselves. I would like to understand the tolerance for going through another retreat on that, or combining it, because I know we've got an academic deep dive that I don't know is gonna last 4 hours.
Well, oh,
No.
we're doing that on the work session in
On the
September,
20,
on the 23rd.
I thought we had a retreat scheduled for an academic deep dive
I
earlier.
don't know if that was it.
It wasn't scheduled.
We had discussed that, but we want to bring.
Yeah, we talked about that today, because there was not a retreat on the books, so.
Well, actually, I emailed Martha to find out about that recently, because we did say we were gonna do that retreat. So if we, I mean, I don't know what the board wants to do. We originally had that down as a retreat, not as a study session, but,
I think in
We
terms
didn't-
of
we hadn't
goals, I think
scheduled
we
the-
can do that in a study session.
pardon me?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Can we make it an item in a study session to create goals?
Oh, yeah, but I
Yeah.
just didn't know if we wanted to do that with staff and everybody present, since it's about us. That's the only thing that, you know, I'm trying to,
Staff wouldn't stay for that.
okay, we
We
just
can
do
put
It
it.
was a
at the
topic,
end.
put it at the beginning or put it at the end.
Or the beginning?
Okay, we could do that. Then Director Bullion and I will work on where that would fit in.
Okay.
Okay.
And on that, okay, yeah.
Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we're done. Adjourned.